This is another example, again, of an angaram piece, just to show you the way in which this nasal bridge has been extended. This piece is a particularly unique piece. It's one of the types of flutes that the people produced. So you had a tympanic type of sound in either the hourglass drums. They also produced a large hollow log type of drum, which was played with a pole, which we do not have an example of in this collection. But this is a flute. It has its playing hole in the back of the bird. We also have some other examples of flutes that I'll show you in a moment. But the hornbill image, the bird, the hornbills are a bird that's present there, and they become, again, part of the entire complex of figures that are frequent in the art production of the region. An example of another one of the Angaram village pieces, again, you see the extended nasal bridge. The pieces in New Guinea are made additionally striking because the people are carving wood or creating fiber masks, but they adorn them with all types of fiber, feathers, shell inset, and then add pigment to it. So you get a really striking combination. And this is probably, again, it's an Angaram village piece, and it's an excellent example of the complexity, the skill of the carvers, because these pieces were being carved traditionally with stone tools. Today, they're still carved with very, very rudimentary tools. Frequently, the carvers have nothing more than some scraps of metal that have been cut out of tin cans and so on that are sharpened. They also sharpen the edges of shell, and to make the rods or to carve the spears and so on that they carve, they sharpen the inside curvature of boar's tusks and use them as a draw knife. So these are being done. So to get this type of beautiful sculptural, complexity and extraordinary detail, these are certainly not, even though the broad area of non-Western tribal art is called primitive, there could certainly not be anything about these pieces that is truly primitive. The terminology is one that unfortunately is not meant to be derogatory, but it's deeply buried in the literature, and it's a hard term to get away from. The canoe is the main form of transportation that has existed through millennia of time. The vegetational condition of the zone being tropical is very dense forested area. There aren't any main roads that run through the area even yet today, so the Sepik River itself becomes the highway of transport. The pieces that the people transport themselves on are hewn logs. They're used, as this image suggests, by standing in them rather than sitting in them. And one of the interesting things about the pieces is that the prows of the canoe are almost always, not always, but almost always rendered in the form of a crocodile. The crocodile, again, is a mythologic ancestor creature, and the earth is seen to have been created by crocodiles rising up out of the murky depths of primordial seas and bringing dirt on their backs to the surface, which then created the land surfaces on which people live. But the other point that might be made about the Sepik River is that it's replete with crocodiles. It's a very deadly body of water to go up and down, and so by having these prows, the thought process is that it will make it safer to ply the waters of the Sepik. These Yam masks, again, are one of the really important pieces produced by the people, and these are actually attached to these ceremonially grown yams and exhibited in the big village ceremonies at the time that the yams are brought out at the end of the growing season. So this is a basketry piece, which then is, you know, has been impregnated with a clay wash and then with the pigment. These are really beautiful pieces and very, very intricate. This is a very rare piece to have as an exhibited piece because for many, many years it has not been legal to bring them out of New Guinea. This was collected back in the 1950s. It's an ancestor's skull. When an individual died, their skull would be retained and they would model it with clay and pitch, put human hair on it, and put the adornment on the face that was the adornment of the individual that was deceased. These skulls were maintained in the men's huts over generations of time and would be brought out at the time of very important village-wide ceremonies. In other words, again, the spirit, soul of the ancestors was present when these were brought out and celebrated, had offerings made to them and so on. This is sort of an unusual piece. I haven't seen very many of these actually. It's a yam snake with an ancestor face. This again would have been a piece that would have been carved to be attached to one of these ceremonially grown yams. But again, it gives you the snake image, which is an important mythologic image, and again, showing the ancestor figure. This piece underscores in a really eloquent way how the most utilitarian tools that the people have all contain very intriguing artistic additions. This is actually a shovel handle for digging yams. So the lower part of the handle and down into the shovel piece is missing. This is just the top adorning piece. But again, it's used for the yam ceremonial preparation of the gardens. This bat piece is an interesting example of what is a piece that is exhibited in the men's huts. This is called a bat wing miri, M-E-R-I. This piece is made by the Atmu people in the middle Sepik region, but this is warning against abuse of women, especially rape. So these images are something that adorn the walls of the men's huts as a symbol of something that is, deeply, deeply needing to be illustrated as a message. These are both examples, slightly different examples of flutes. This one, again, has a top hole like the earlier flute that was demonstrated. It also has the inset of cowrie shells, and again, it has an image of an ancestor figure on the apex of it. This is also an ancestor figure with a bird on its back. In this case, the body of the flute is in bamboo and has multiple holes. But the flute is a very, very important aspect of the ceremonies that are conducted by the people, because again, you have the drums, which are a tympanic instrument, you have the flutes, which are a wind instrument, and you also have an item which we don't have in the exhibit, which were flat board-like pieces that were sort of elliptical in shape, that were tied to a line and spun, that are called bull roarers, which make a very, very haunting noise as they are spun, and the longer the cord, the louder the noise that you get. This is an example of a Papuan Gulf piece. It's a skull rack piece. During traditional times, in some cases, ancestor skulls were suspended from these, as well as sometimes skulls of enemy that were killed in battle. So the racks, I'm just showing the way in which these were used. These again were hung on the walls of the men's huts and then utilized for multiple skull storage. This is an interesting piece. It's a shaman's magic bag that they stored various potions in. There were herbal potions. It's a woven piece, and then it has a series of bones attached. The bones in this case are pig bones, and these were carried by the shaman or the sorcerers and used in healing ceremonies or used in ceremonies that were meant to be either benevolent or malevolent. These are interesting pieces. They're called Sioux, and they're an atmal piece. These are actually representations of women's breasts that are worn by men in sort of a ceremony of impersonating women. But again, they're adorned with facial features and so on. This is one of the helmet masks that are worn during the ceremonial periods. This is a very unusual one because the eyes, in this case, are inset with frogs, which is a very interesting feature of this particular and quite rare helmet mask. It's fiber and pigment. This is an old piece, and you can tell by the faded nature of the pigments that it's one that has quite some age to it. This again is another atmal piece. This is a woven piece that's called a bridal veil, so that during the marriage ceremony the woman would wear this, and it trails down. But what's interesting about this piece is it's woven in such a way that the very end part of this ends in a crocodile. This discussion concludes our consideration of some of these wonderful pieces representing the presence of the spirits and the complexity of the cosmologic structure of New Guinea society. Clearly, these pieces are drawn from various zones along the Sepik River, from the upper Sepik, middle Sepik, and lower Sepik areas. And the Sepik itself contained during traditional times some 1,200 different languages, many of which were unintelligible from one village to the next village, so that it was a very complex area linguistically, and the deep time mythologies of the people and so on are represented in this art. I'm Dr. Adrien Hannus from the Anthropology Department at Augustana College in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Appreciate your attention. Thank you.